Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to BRGM podcast. BRGM is lucky here now because we are having Maria Nuutinen. She is the Forestry Official from the FAO. FAO is a Food and Agriculture Organizations. This is a specialized agency of the United Nations that international lead our fightings against hunger. And also FAO is trying hard to achieve access for the for all of us, for people, to get access to the high quality of foods. And Maria Nuutinen is here, so it's gonna be interesting for us to listen to her about the now with the efforts of BRGM in restoring the degraded peatland, and also to rehabilitate the mangrove, especially for our efforts to mitigate the crisis of climate change. Hello, Maria. How are you?
Hello, Didy. Thank you so much for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Okay, thanks. Because we are very pleased you are here. Although we are separated from Indonesia, and Maria is in Rome, Italy. That's why we are talking on the screen. And Maria, my first question is because nowadays people always talk about the mitigations of the crisis of climate change. So what's the impact of the climate change, the crisis of climate change, to the whole of the world in terms of the FAO efforts to provide food for all people in the world?
Thank you so much for this question. Indeed, we are in a climate urgency at the moment. I started working on climate change in 2003 for the first time. And I have to say, 20 years later, I would have never expected that we're in this situation, that the impacts of climate change are already so much felt, especially in the dry regions, but also where I'm from, towards the boreal region, and also, of course, in Indonesia, has faced very heavily the impacts of climate change. The biggest impacts often are told, of course, the mean global increase of mean temperature, and this shows especially in the water cycle. So in more intense droughts happening in strange times, monsoon rains moving, rains becoming more intense or less frequent, or too much water in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is what the FAO pathway at the moment. We are focusing a lot on water. And this is, of course, at the heart of also of peatland and mangrove management and restoration, what is the mandate of BRGM. So what FAO does globally, we have 192 member countries.
192.
Let me just yes, exactly. Let me just check that, but I think this is the latest. 192. There are the parties. So one of the parties also, for example, European Union is a party to the UN. Let me just check that. And indeed, FAO has most of the countries in the world are members, member states, and they are requesting support from FAO among other things, but especially in recent years to work on climate change. We have a lot of decentralized offices at the country level, in the field offices, regions, and here in the headquarters, where we're working very closely, like similarly with the FAO office in Indonesia and in the Asia Pacific, supporting countries such as Indonesia. So there are very different ways. So FAO works on different sectors, from the cropping, grazing land management, from forestry, fisheries, and aquaculture, and all this is, of course, very heavily impacted by the climate impacts in different, and mostly, of course, in a negative way. So agriculture sectors, as we call these 5 different ones, are really facing and struggling in many countries, especially in those where populations are most poor, vulnerable, where the livelihoods are relying on one source only. And the peatland areas are very specific in this, because as you know, the changes in the rainfall affects already the peatlands become more vulnerable, let alone when there has been a long-term drainage. They become much more vulnerable and emit a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions per hectare. That's the big impact, and one key reason, of course, why Indonesia has invested so much in peatland restoration, especially since 2016. And now with the new mandate also of BRGM of investing in mangrove rehabilitation.
Okay. Maria, you just told us about the many countries request FAO assistance or help in terms of what is foods and what is mitigations of the crisis of the climate change. And then, of course, Indonesia is different from other countries in terms of culture, probably the behavior of the local people, the way that we are using the agricultural lands. Do you have idea that what kind of strategies and plan of FAO to help Indonesia to provide to make sure that we have a sustainable foods, and then help Indonesia with the mitigations of the crisis of climate change? Because Indonesia, of course, we are different from other countries. Also, we are doing very well in agriculture, but do you have any kind of opinion or something that we have to think about that?
Yeah, thanks so much for this question. So, of course, for all development cooperation, the starting point that is what the country has identified as its key needs and requirements. So this is what we're here to serve. As mentioned, FAO serves these member countries, and especially focusing on the developing and emerging countries. Indonesia is, of course, economically booming, and things are going fine, as you mentioned, in many cases. However, there are intense climate impacts, and FAO, and Indonesia has set itself clear targets through the nationally determined contributions to which is submitted regularly following the Paris Agreement, so that we could stop the climate change, global warming from advancing. So following the Paris Agreement goals to reach the net zero by at the latest by 2050 in terms of emissions, and try to limit the global warming to the maximum of well, as close as possible to the 1.5 degrees of increase. So there's the mitigation part of limiting emissions, but also the adaptation part in the Paris Agreement. So supporting the local population, the indigenous peoples, the local communities all around the world to better adapt to the climate change impacts. So there is these different aspects, and also together with the adaptation, where I'm working more and more now, because the climate impact is so strongly felt already, comes also the resilience. So the ability of the communities to bounce back, to recover from potential crises or incidents such as the large extent of fire, flooding, or other things which are also related to peatlands and mangroves. So those, well, fire, of course, more peatlands than mangroves. That's, and then of course we have sorry. Yeah, so the FAO starts with normally with this country programming frameworks that are identified together with the focal ministry. In this case, I understand our key focal ministry is the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and then of course Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Marine Affairs. So we are supporting, the country identifies itself the targets, of course how it contributes to the Sustainable Development Goals nationally, the climate change mitigation adaptation goals under the Paris Agreement, the biodiversity goals. So there are a lot of these different kind of global but also national targets. And then FAO support is directed especially to those needs. And again, of course, when there are food-related emergencies, animal diseases, I know there are quite wide extent of programs supporting Indonesia with those kind of activities as well.
Okay, thanks, Maria. And then BRGM itself. BRGM is what is national institutions. The BRGM is the agency for the peatland restorations and mangrove, the Republic of Indonesia. And then our main task is to restoring the degraded peatland because of the wildfire or because of the establishment of the canals. And also we also have to rehabilitate mangrove in the area that's suitable to grow mangrove, because quite recently Indonesia is suffering from the mangrove degradation. And looking at the tasks and the functions of BRGM, do you think that BRGM assignment is related to the mitigations of the crisis of the climate change? Because you know, our main task, if we are talking about the restoring the degraded peatland, we are trying to prevent the wildfire. So is it anything to do with the peatland restorations with our efforts to mitigate the climate change?
Oh, definitely a lot. And I think it was such a big moment when Indonesia, through the president, through your president in late 2015 at the UN climate negotiations, made the commitment of restoring peatlands. There was of course, as a follow-up also of these intense fires, the latest incident of the biggest peatland and forest fires that you had. And then in 2016 already, we were in a position, luckily with my team, to support organize first workshop together with your BRGM staff, in order to identify how this immense task of restoring over 2.4 million hectares, I think that was the original target at that point, could be achieved in a best, most effective manner, and who are the stakeholders to be involved, how the process could could be achieved? What are the actually existing technical guidelines? What kind of support to the knowledge policy, apart from the technical implementation, could be considered? I think we already discussed at this stage a bit more about the monitoring efforts, how this could be set up. And then later on in 2018, we started supporting BRGM in developing this monitoring framework for looking how actually the peatland restoration is having an impact. The implementation, of course, has been, I think nobody has done this scale of restoration on peatlands before. So it was is an immense task, and everybody knew that when you started it. Exactly, in several islands, different types of in a socioeconomic context where you were referring to this as well. And now, of course, Indonesia is in very good position that you have this the NDC first of all, and to support that also the follow NetSync implementation plan. And now I understand there has been quite a detailed work from the district level upwards to the provincial level, together with the ministry and BRGM together, to plan and think how this is actually going to be implemented at the field level. So that's really admirable that you're working with the district and local level governments, and you're trying to make that happen. What then, when we think about the strategy, of course, what we've been emphasizing over and over together in our discussions, what we saw also when we are implementing the monitoring efforts, is that the full vetting of the peatlands at the PHU, or the peatland hydrological unit, all the peatland which is connected together, is very important, especially now with the not only for when fire risk is high, like this year when the El Nino is expected to set in full on, but also for the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. Because in a normal year, most emissions are coming from peatland degradation. So the fire years are only kind of peak years, and of course it's intensified. The burning of peatlands is intensified when there are dry years. So the full revetting of peatlands is very effective way of stopping the greenhouse gas emissions, meaning the mitigating of mitigation of climate change. And then again, let's talk about as a separate item when the fire season hits and the peatlands are being burned. By the way, mostly, of course, it's a human impact and can be managed therefore by humans. Then again, their emissions are very, very intense. So if the full revetting is working as it should, the water is brought to almost the level of the surface, if not to the surface. In that case, you're getting very big benefits for the climate, also for the people's adaptation. This means, for example, for livelihoods. But this is something, what we've been discussing quite a lot on this approach of green peatland economy, and how the socio-economic solutions that so far have been relying on this digging of the canals or setting up the drainage system and then using it as a dry land, whereas actually the peatland, to maintain its ecosystem services, maintain its health should be and should remain wet. So this is why once we are building an economy, also in my country, we've been building an economy where a lot of the activities have been based in this, at least in the local level, in the income generated by drained peatlands. How then we shift to the new type of economy? I think this is at the heart of the idea that BRGM had for this green peatland economy. And from FAO's side, we are supporting it in several different means. I can tell you more about that, but if your time allows.
Okay, thanks, Maria. And then you talk about the effort to continue the peatland restoration is a must. Just because of to prevent from the wildfire or the forest fire. And then you talk about we can do to save the emission or to reduce emission from the peatland restorations. And you know that the strategy of BRGM for restoring the peatland, degraded peatland. We rewetting the peatlands by developing the constructions like canal blockings, and then we built or we mix the deep wells, and we also doing the revegetations at the to protect the cover of the peatlands. And also you mentioned about the revitalizations of the livelihoods, and you talk about the green peatland economy. So this is the concept is very important or very useful to make this successful of the peatland restorations. Why, if we work together, why we promote the green peatland economy for this purpose to restore the degraded peatland?
Yes, I think the approach for green peatland economy is also to attract finance for it, so that the transitioning from this old way of managing peatlands to the new way, which might be more building on different types of livelihoods. Maybe not all the livelihoods need to be depending on the peatland landscape, right? Indonesia has a very dynamic young population who is studying a lot, learning a lot of new things, new professions. Maybe there are less needs in the future to rely on the peatlands as, for example, to produce palm oil or other goods in the drained peatland environment. And we hear also this from the private sector, by the way, that they are starting to retire certain plantation areas. And I think everybody is aware that Indonesia is very serious in the commitment to achieve the climate targets and contribute to the climate change mitigation, because the peatlands and in general this economy building on drainage-based activities is very heavily emitting greenhouse gases. So all peatlands from my region, from the boreal to the tropics, are sources of greenhouse gases. But in the tropics, because of the heat, because of the huge layers of peat that you have, and also different type of biochemistry activities, microbial activities in the peatlands, they emit quite significant amount of greenhouse gases. And this is one reason why there's also a lot of donor countries, so bilateral support to Indonesia has been going into the recent years to support also BRGM in this restoration task to reduce, or if not stop, the greenhouse gas emissions by revetting the peatlands. Indeed, that is the key thing of blocking the drainage ditches with the necessary frequency, depending of the characteristics of the peatlands, and then establishing the correct vegetation, the wetland vegetation that will help to keep the water in the ground, because of course with the temperatures like what we are having here today, it's very hard to keep the ground wet. And then finally, as you mentioned, this is super important point, the revitalization, so that the communities who are living around the peat are not exposed to fire events or the diseases and other health impacts that the fire and haze are causing, but also are able to survive, and not only survive but thrive, live well in an economic model with livelihood sources that are compatible with these wet peatlands. For example, I know that there has been a lot of development work within BRGM, but also other bodies, universities. We did a recent case study about how it could work if you block totally the drainage ditches and you could raise some fish in the blocked drainage ditches. It can be quite profitable. It needs to be just selected as native species and done in a sustainable way. For example, composting then afterwards the sludge and so forth. So this kind of approaches apart from producing, for example, ilipe nuts or other food sources on the revetted peatlands. Of course, there is a quite large host of different plants. I think one study was identifying potentially commerciable plants, at least 90, and if not up to 1,500 different species that could be helpful for Indonesians to generate sustainable livelihoods from wet peatlands. But this requires funding, so that's also part of the green peatland economy, that you would need to see what kind of financial sources could be there to support, for example, the technical assistance to the communities, the full level technical guidance to how the revetting is done, so that it in the different conditions, so that the peatland remains really wet.
Okay, thank you, Maria. This is the last questions, the last but not least, because BRGM and FAO have been working together, now. Yeah, you have told us many things about the what is contribution of FAO to the BRGM. So, any specific thing that from FAO could contribute to help the BRGM, that BRGM later will be able to do the mitigation of the climate change? What do you think about that? The specific FAO contribution to the FAO.
Well,
BRGM,
I have listed here. Yeah, I have listed here 5 things, but I don't know if even six things. I hope this is okay if I go through these points. You're very specific. All right, very good. Let's start with the monitoring, because this is something where our request was originally coming, and of course, in the unit where I've been working here with the National Forest Inventories and now with the Forest and Climate unit, this is kind of really at the core and something very, let's say, we have a comparative advantage on this. So we've been working together indeed with BRGM and the ministry from 2018 now, developing this soil moisture monitoring tool. And now I know that Indonesia has this treasure of very extensive monitoring points, which are also surviving some the fire events, monitoring points which are automatically logging the groundwater level in the peatlands. They're also in atmospheric conditions and so forth, to understand how the groundwater level is developing. So this data is very important for BRGM to understand how, in this point, the groundwater level is developing thanks to the restoration. However, where you need to understand more is how at the landscape level in the larger area of the peatlands, because these units are expensive. So the tool that we've developed on soil moisture, which indicates the groundwater level through remote sensing, has been very useful. We're getting really good feedback from different actors in Indonesia. So this work has to be further continued, as we discussed even recently when my colleagues were in Jakarta, and with Adam Gerand, the colleague in Jakarta, so that the tool for soil moisture can be calibrated. Maybe the BRGM can do this with the ministry or with Lapan, and see how, if not sharing the data with us, to see what the tool can tell on the direction, how the peatland soil moisture is developing. And let's not forget, there is also quite extensive work on subsidence, which is a second key indicator of the peatland rehabilitation. So that's what on the monitoring side. I think the monitoring aspects could be further complemented by the socio-economic monitoring, to kind of combine more the socio-economic monitoring aspects into the monitoring system, so that BRGM knows how the people's perception, the livelihoods are developing also as the peatland restoration advances. Can I continue still, because I have those other points? I don't know how your time is. I have lots to share.
Anyway, thank you very much, Maria, for your times. I'm Didy Wurjanto from BRGM, and then I'm very lucky to have a chance to talk to you, to discuss with you about FAO that can contribute to the BRGM, so we can improve our achievement to do our tasks. So thank you very much, Maria. And then probably we can see you again next time. And say the best for the rest of our colleague at the FAO.
Thank you so much. I would like to extend this thank you to all the BRGM staff. It's been a pleasure to work together for the past 6-7 years already. And we look forward to further developing the green peatland economy, for example, the financial support. And we'll be in touch. Thank you so much, Didy.
Thank you. Colleagues. Much green peatland economy. Thank you. Bye-bye, Maria. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye. You too. Bye.
And then this is the end of the sessions, our interview with Maria from FAO. She is the forestry officials. And then hopefully our discussion is going to be fruitful for your knowledge. Thank you. Bye-bye. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.